Welcome to the Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris.
Today we're closing out season 4 with the episode Gomer Pyle, United States Marine Corps. And this is an episode which we had originally said was a backdoor pilot.
We've talked about this one. I was excited to watch it. I very much enjoyed it. And it seems like a consequential episode in the grand canon of Andy Griffith.
Yes. Now, I had been calling this a backdoor pilot. And Randy Turner called me last week and explained to me that it was not a backdoor pilot. And he said it's not a backdoor pilot. It's a spinoff. On a backdoor pilot, completely new characters are introduced.
Okay.
And I got really mad. And I said, what about Sergeant Carter? And he still explained to me that didn't work. So we got into a shouting match, and I eventually hung up on him.
Yeah, wow, good for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to take that kind of silliness.
Good.
I'm just
power
kidding.
To the people. All the power to all the people.
Yeah, I'm just kidding. We did not get into a shouting match. But that we talked about it, and the more I thought about it, I was kind of like, okay, a backdoor pilot is one where you basically put people on a show, you bring people on, and you're like, if this is a hit, then we'll move forward with the series. They had already made the plan to go forward with Gomer Pyle, United States Marine Corps, before this spinoff was
like a little like just a test run. This is a little like we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing.
Or just setting the stage to say this is what you're going to be seeing next fall.
Yep.
Yeah. So what'd you think of it?
Great episode. This is fun.
Yeah.
Super fun. I was a little reminiscent just because Andy Griffith on a base of All the President's Men. What was the movie called?
All the President's Men. Yeah. No Time for Sergeants.
No Time for Sergeants.
Yeah. No, I would agree with you. This is kind of right in the same vein. I mean, it's almost, I have to imagine they just said, we're going to do No Time for Sergeants, but we're going to put Gomer Pyle in it, and we're going to make a series out of it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So this episode first aired on May 18th, 1964. It was written, directed, and produced by Aaron Rubin, who would go on to lead the Andy Griffith Show to be a showrunner for Gomer Pyle, United States Marine Corps. Actually, in my conversation with Randy about this episode going into it, he said he thinks, it wasn't just Don Knotts leaving. He thinks Aaron Rubin leaving also led to kind of the tone of the show, or just the show change, changing over time.
Don't you call people a rube as a little jab? It's like Aaron the Rube Rubin.
That probably happened. I mean, I do. My a good friend of mine and I, we would always talk about the scene from Silence of the Lambs where where Hannibal Lecter says, "Let me tell you, Clarice, you're a rube," and he's talking about how she's trying to basically she goes, "You've got your cheap shoes and your cheap suit, and you've tried to basically cover up for that all the way here." And my friend and I were, because she's supposed to be profiling, and I'd be like, "Boy, you're pretty good at this," and so that's what we always thought would be funny to say. Yeah, but the term rube it can be considered. It's kind of like rube. It's also like boob. They call each other boob on that show, on the Andy Griffith Show, all the time.
Yep. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. It was shot earlier in the, it was probably shot midway through the season, but they held on to it till the end of the season for obvious reasons.
Yep.
We open at the jail, and Gomer comes in and starts singing the Marine fight song to Andy, who is confused. And, it's one of those things where this episode starts, and I'd forgotten that it was just him and Andy the entire time. I didn't realize
there's no one else.
There's no one else. Yeah. And it turns out he is enlisted in the U.S. Marines. He was going to be drafted, so he decided to enlist and has to report the next day. Just kind of almost setting the stage. Gomer mentions that the major general for the Marines is named Lucius Pyle. And Andy, as rightfully so, not sure that this is a good idea, because Gomer kind of marches to his own beat. He definitely doesn't march to anybody else's beat, and he's kind of saying that it might be more demanding than Mayberry. But he goes ahead and he volunteers to take him down to the camp at Wilmington, North Carolina.
Which is nice. Nice of him.
Yeah, and And he is. I mean, there is something to be said. This isn't like to Gomer, like, you're too stupid. You're too stupid to be in the Marines. There's just kind of a level of you're not really. You like to sit and tell stories and make small talk with people and do those sorts of things, and that's not really what they're going to be looking for there. You know,
it's not Penske material.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but then again, you know, we shall. He could have said, "We shall see." Ta-ta. Which is what George Costanza would have said. But so we cut to stock footage of a Marine base that is supposed to be Camp Wilson. And the gate they go to is actually the gate at Desilu Studios. And apparently they're running late. Andy brings Gomer and gets them checked in. And we've got Sergeant Carter checking people in, and Gomer is not there. But in the meantime, Sergeant Carter is giving them a welcome speech. Sergeant Carter is played by Frank Sutton. And Frank Sutton was in some earlier movies. I mean, he was in Marty, which was a Best Picture winner. He was one of Ernest Borgnine's kind of, I guess you could say in quotation marks, buddies. He's one of the jerks from the neighborhood. But when he played Sergeant Carter, he kind of made this character iconic. I mean, you don't remember a whole lot about. I mean, I know there are huge fans of Gomer Pyle, but if you ask your average casual television viewer, they remember two things from that series. They remember Gomer and they remember Sergeant Carter.
Got it.
And he made this character kind of iconic. There's actually a statue. He was from Clarksville, Tennessee. There's a statue of him in Clarksville, Tennessee. He was actually in real life also a sergeant in the Army.
Oh, okay. So he was method acting as though he were himself.
Well, it's not like R. Lee Ermey when he went and played the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket. Have you ever seen Full Metal Jacket?
I have, but it's been a while, and I don't remember much of it.
Well, this kind of made me, and not to go womp womp, but this kind of made me think about it because in Full Metal Jacket, you know, there's one character that just can't keep up, and they nickname him Pyle, and and they do all, and he just can't keep up, and that scenario, I mean, I don't even want to get more. It's not like I'm worried about spoiler alert. But that came out in 1987. So if you haven't seen it, that's on you. But it is a very morbid ending of a guy who's just kind of not able to keep pace. And this is kind of a happy ending for a guy who's not able to keep pace.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And so, but as I thought about this, I was kind of like, this episode kind of almost mirrors the first half of Full Metal Jacket, except Full Metal Jacket is more realistic and gritty. I mean,
I like that take.
Yeah, it really does. If you really think about it, it really kind of does, except there's no Andy in the window, but it's the same kind of thing. I mean, a lot of the very same scenarios. So Gomer comes walking over with a goofy grin, and he starts telling Sergeant Carter about issues with the car driving over. And then meanwhile, Sergeant Carter is about to rip his head off. And this will be kind of a staple in the spinoff series. I mean, this is kind of the whole idea and the whole story about how it would often work. The thing of it is like, as the show would go on, Sergeant Carter would get really mad at Gomer, but he kind of got mad at him as kind of a big brother would or a father would to a child. He still kind of was very protective of him too.
Yep. Yeah. It's they create such a good dynamic of Gomer maintaining his own personality. And, you know, when he's first getting yelled at and he's, you know, you could see the two guys in row with him who are trying hard not to break. Oh,
you could tell that too when he was singing the Marine fight song with the bucket on his head. Oh, that was so funny because they are watching that. I'm like, yeah, I think that's genuine. I think they're not. I don't think they were supposed to be doing that. I just think they couldn't stop.
Yeah,
and so Sergeant Carp, as we mentioned, he keeps talking to the guy next to him. He has to put the bucket on his head. Everybody's trying not to laugh. They're going to get set up for the barracks. Gomer is last. And at the barracks, Andy checks in on Gomer, and Gomer doesn't fall into line when Sergeant Carter comes in. And so we're now at a point where in a minute. Yeah. He keeps ending up getting kitchen patrol added to him.
Is that what I didn't ever catch?
That's what KP is. Yeah. And he keeps getting that added. And so by this point, he's at 10 weeks. Sergeant Carter leaves, and the men are trying to get Gomer. I think at this point, they're kind of like, this guy's going to get us in so much trouble. I think they're just trying to get him, to get rid of him. Do you think that's fair, or do you think they're just being mean?
I think they're just being mean. They're just bullies.
Yeah. And they will tell him what will make Sergeant Carter happy is if he shows up next time in full uniform. And they give him Sergeant Carter's full blue military blues dress suit. And naturally, Sergeant Carter comes back and Gomer shows up saying the suit doesn't fit. And
it's all right, though. It's pretty good.
It does fit for I mean, considering that Jim Nabors is like 6 feet, is like 6 inches taller than he is. Yeah, it really does. And maybe he's not 6 inches, but he's at least 3 or 4 inches. And so, and then we see Sergeant Carter it's like they do a lot of close-ups in this episode, especially between Gomer and Sergeant Carter when he's right in his face. But the look, like just the zooming in on his face and him just kind of shaking and about to come apart at the seams as we go to commercial. That's unique for this series.
Yeah, totally.
And it was also unique. I mean, this actually, I looked at clock the time. They went into commercial at like 15 minutes into the episode, which is very, very late for a typical episode.
I noticed the same thing.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you did. So now we're in the break. We're going to do a couple of things. The first thing I wanted to do is just mention that this episode was produced by Pod Machine, who does editing, artwork. They do video and audio productions of the podcast, and they do it all at a great rate. I would recommend going to podmachine.com to learn more and enter Loaded Goat at checkout if you're interested in moving forward. You'll get a 10% discount. So now that we're in the break, we're going to break down the greatest spinoffs of all time, at least in our opinion. And unfortunately, we had a page on Wikipedia that lists all the spinoffs ever made. And some of this stuff,
long.
It's so comprehensive. Yeah. And some of the shows you were like, I was going through this. I was like, this show had a spinoff. I had no idea.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You want to go first for number 5?
Yeah. Why not? I'm going to go with The Hills as a spinoff from Laguna Beach. That show had some real legs and launched, put Spencer and Lowe on the map in ways that like the Laguna Beach wouldn't have done and separated them from Kristen and Brody and the rest of the crew.
Was Spencer on, was he also, so he was on Laguna Beach too, right?
Yeah, no, I don't think so, actually.
So
I think Spencer came later.
Because Spencer I never watched The Hills, but I watched a lot of clips from The Hills on the Soup.
Yeah.
I mean, my favorite obviously the one they kept running was when Nick Lachey is on and they're talking with Spencer and Nick Lachey jumps in and one of the girls on the show goes, "Stay out of it, Nick Lachey." And I can't remember what the episode was about.
Not about much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. And Spencer has managed to stay, I wouldn't say relevant, but he's managed to stay
he's around.
He's managed to stay around. Yeah. That's impressive. I wouldn't have, if you told me, we're still going to be talking about this guy.
He's got lasting power. Yeah.
He's got lasting power. I would have said you're crazy. Yeah. All right. My number 5 is A Different World. It was a spinoff of The Cosby Show, and it was where Denise goes to college. But Denise is only on for 1 season, and then she leaves and she goes back home. And but they managed to keep the show going because they had populated it with so many great characters, and then they just added to it. And it really had some very laugh out loud episodes.
Never seen or heard of it. I'll have to look it up.
It's on HBO Max. You should, or now it's just Max, but you should check it out.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Next one. This is a show I really liked. Zoom.
I don't know.
It was a children's show on PBS about like kind of problem solving and playing, and I watched it a lot when I was growing up, and it was a rebuild of a late 1970s show called Zoom. It's how a lot of kids learn to spell Massachusetts.
Oh, that's
good
nice.
Show.
Yeah, I didn't have any help spelling Massachusetts.
Yeah, I can't, but it was helpful for some kids.
It was hard. I had to basically just pull myself up, learn on my own. There was no television to help me out with that. My next, and this is, you might be kind of like, wow, you disagree, but number 4 would be NCIS, which was a spinoff of JAG. I feel like the show is kind of at this point might be like it's kind of like maybe like Andy Griffith was, towards the end, as you just kind of like showing up and hanging out with the characters. But there was a certain period, it really kind of kickstarted several, not only NCIS, but several other NCIS shows. And when it was clicking on all cylinders, it was the best procedural on TV.
Okay. I'm going to go for the next one. I'm more just interested in this flow of spinoffs. You got Degrassi High, 1989 to 1991. Then you got Degrassi The Next Generation, 2001 to 2015. And then you got the spinoff of Degrassi The Next Generation to Degrassi The Next Class. So it's a spinoff off of a spinoff off of a spinoff, which is the only one I saw on the list like that.
So did you watch the original Degrassi?
No. But my wife was a big fan of the Next Generation with Drake and, all that. So it's an active part of my life.
It's funny, my parents, and this is the 80s, and I wouldn't say my dad was really one to get wrapped up in a show about high schoolers, but yeah, my mom really loved watching Degrassi High.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Number 3 for me is Frasier. Great spinoff of Cheers that they ended up, it was, Frasier was kind of just always portrayed as the more, the neurotic, cerebral character on Cheers. I mean, he was a great character, but he ends up they put him in a different city and give him a family, and he ended up lasting for several years too, and still being a very funny show.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Okay. I was this is just more, I was interested in this. All That had so many spinoffs that I never would have guessed it. The Keenan and Kel was a spinoff of All That. The Amanda Show, Nick Cannon Show, Zoe 101. I did not know that was the beginning of it.
Yeah. And so that's your number 2. So my number 2, and I've got, well, actually, before we dive into number 1, we should also make a point to just mention a few things. My number 2 is The Jeffersons.
Okay.
Spinoff of All in the Family, as was a show called Maude with B. Arthur that was on for a long time in the 70s. But The Jeffersons was just a really funny show. It was also a groundbreaking show, and it was just I think if you spin off from a show and you're on for almost 10 or 11 seasons, you're doing something right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Now, a few ones I wanted to mention. Obviously, Andy Griffith had Gomer Pyle. They also had Mayberry RFD that aired after the Andy Griffith Show. And I feel like it's not on the list, but the Law and Order spinoffs are worth noting just because there's been so many of them.
Endless.
I mean, you've got, it's a whole, you got SVU, you've got the original now, you've still got SVU, you've got Organized Crime. I watch Organized Crime. It is really silly, but I still watch it pretty regularly.
Okay, yeah, I never got into those.
Yeah, and they've had some they had like Law and Order Los Angeles that didn't last. They had Law and Order Criminal Intent that was on for a long time. They had Trial by Jury that didn't last very long. So they've had some real big hits, and then they've had some that just didn't last.
Some flops.
Yeah.
Okay. My number 1 is you can't beat the Colbert Report. The heydays of Daily Show, Jon Stewart with Colbert Report. So good. Wonderful. That was on 3 to 4 p.m. for me right after school. Just a fun way to begin your evening.
Yeah, I think the Daily Show, I can't remember when the Daily Show launched. I think it might have launched when I was
like 96 or something.
Yeah, right. I think I was starting college right when it launched. I watched it at times and thought it was pretty entertaining. There was one on the Daily Show where they were following this. A. Whitney Brown was with this candidate who just had run the worst campaign, and he was just running a terrible campaign, and he's getting trounced. And he's sitting there watching the returns come in, and he's basically by himself, and he's sitting there and he goes, "I'm still a winner. I'm still a winner." And A. Whitney Brown goes, "No, you're a loser. And that is something they can never take away from you." And I was just kind of like, oh my, that was awful, but it was pretty funny.
Just plug that directly into a Succession episode with Connor.
Yeah, that is something they can never take away from you. But this is number one for me. And it's very recent. Better Call Saul. I would have never thought you could have done what you did. Take basically kind of the wild card from Breaking Bad and build a whole story around it. But they did an amazing job with that.
Still making new episodes, right?
No, they're done. It wrapped up. It wrapped up. I think it wrapped up last year.
I think it's important to notice that Joey got a snub here intentionally.
Oh yes, he did. I mean, and that was like one where you were kind of like, I'd like to see this do well. I mean, he came on, Andrea De Matteo came on and played his sister after leaving The Sopranos, and it just did not work.
Couldn't do it.
Yeah, I kind of feel like if you're doing Friends and you don't have Chandler, and you don't have, you almost need a Chandler to kind of set
for sure
to almost be the compass in the room. Or to almost just say what everybody's thinking. So now that we're back after the break, Gomer is sitting in the barracks with a bucket over his head, and no one's there. And Andy goes in to check on Gomer. Apparently, you could just wander around military bases in 1964, and no one
didn't matter at all. Didn't care. Cold War or whatever.
Yeah, you can stick your head in the window in barracks. No one minded. And so he asks him if he would be disappointed if the Marines sent him home. And Gomer kind of all of a sudden,
touching moment.
Yeah, like all of a sudden, like the aw shucks goes away, and he said it would break his spirit and that he really wants to stay. And so Andy then goes into the officers club, which I didn't realize you could just get in without being an officer, but apparently you can.
Well, maybe he wasn't. Maybe this is where his former military career.
Maybe, which is always,
it's really a VFW.
It's on base, yeah. And so, or maybe he's somewhere in town, I don't know. But so Andy goes into some sort of bar, but I thought it was an officers club, and he hears Sergeant Carter telling the story of what happened earlier that day, and they're kind of like, "What are you going to do?" And he's like, "I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to let the colonel come by for inspection and see Gomer, and they'll kick him out of the Marines."
Mm-hmm.
And Sergeant Carter goes to pay the bill, and Andy introduces himself. And it is just so funny because Sergeant Carter could have just been like, okay, fine, and just left. But he almost bites and says, "What's this guy's story?" And Andy does a bang-up job of alluding to the fact that he might be General Pyle's son. So,
he does makes it super clear.
Well, he tries not. He acts like he's not doing it. He almost plays a bumbling idiot trying to do that. And then Sergeant Carter decides he's being tested because there's no way General Pyle's son is that much of a goofball. And he says, "I'm going to whip this guy into shape," and he goes to work. And we cut to a montage of Sergeant Carter getting Gomer ready for inspection. And it's not going well. I mean, you're kind of like, how's this going to work out? But then inspection time happens, and the colonel comes in, and it appears that Gomer has just all of a sudden been whipped into shape like that. And the colonel hears Gomer's name, and he says, "Well, I would have thought he might be Lucius Pyle's boy, but General Pyle has no children." And Sergeant Carter is seething as we go to commercial.
Seethes away.
Yeah.
Almost explodes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in the epilogue, Gomer tells Andy the whole story. And Sergeant Carter comes in, and Gomer says he will be with him in a minute, and keeps going on. And then, of course, Andy bolts as Sergeant Carter walks up to Gomer and makes him put the bucket on his head as we close.
It's funny. I like the bucket on the head motif. Good.
Yeah. And so Gomer Pyle would air for 5 seasons and was basically number 2 when it ended. Jim Nabors basically just decided to leave. Because he was just kind of like, I would imagine after a while, if you're Jim Nabors, who was actually an accomplished singer and a fairly cosmopolitan individual, he probably was getting tired of just doing Gomer Pyle. So he said he wanted to try something different. And so he ended up getting the Jim Nabors Comedy Hour, which was on for 2 seasons.
How quickly after this episode did Gomer Pyle U.S.M.C. premiere?
Well, this was in May, so it would have aired sometime in the fall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very fast, though.
Yeah. Cool. And going forward, there are going to be some episodes where some Mayberry crossover episodes. We're going to review those, but we're going to wait and review them in the seasons where they took place.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And this is the last episode of season 4. It was also, it did not get any awards this year. than this particular year. And but it was a great send off. I mean, I think what Randy was telling me is that with Jim Nabors, they really are like, we need to give him a spinoff show, or somebody else is going to snag. Basically, another network's going to snag him and do something else with him.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Yeah.
How many whistles would you give this?
10 whistles.
10?
10. It's a good episode.
It was a good episode. I'd probably go
with 8.
You? I'd go with 8.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah. And so next week, we're going to be doing we're going to be in between seasons 4 and 5. I think next week what we're going to do is we're going to review a movie called The Incredible Mr. Limpet. I don't know if you've ever seen that or not.
Mm-mm.
It is basically the movie Don Knotts made to test the waters and see if he could be a movie star before he left the Indie Griffith show to work in movies. So we'll be doing that. Any final thoughts?
No, good episode. It's been a good season.
It has been a good season, and season 5 we'll have some real strong ones as well. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I thank everybody for listening. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe. Next week, we'll do The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Until then, Christopher, I'm going to close with one of Sergeant Carter's famous lines. Move it, move it, move it.
Be with you in a minute.